Hello, world. This is Talking Live, and we hope you're going to stay tuned. We have a special guest here, Jose Stelle, and he has been on our shows quite a few times, and he's becoming a regular, and we enjoy his knowledge that he has, and so you stay tuned. Okay, here we go again with Jose, and he's going to talk about some stuff. And I asked you earlier, before we come on the air, about people voting without ID. Now, what's your outlook or your perspective on that?
Well, obviously, if you're not a citizen and if you haven't, died for the country and paid the taxes and worked and done all these things that give you the right to say anything about the country, you obviously should not vote or be given any such right. But here's what I've been talking about throughout this series of lectures, and that these problems are things that happen in a democratic system. They are already basically present in Article 1 of the Constitution, which created this whole mess, right, of parties and elections and majorities of one can overturn the country and turn it upside down, right? These things of, let's say, foreigners coming into the country and desiring to vote, of course, they themselves don't necessarily want to do it, but the organized interest, the political parties, the demagogues, whoever wants to overturn the Constitution, they have an interest in using these people in order to get what they want. Now, this is not something that's happening in America only. Of course, elections have been stolen throughout history, right? In Rome, elections were stolen. In Greece, elections were stolen. The problem that they had, for example, around the time of Plato or even before that, Socrates, they began to see this problem, is that in those days there was no such thing as coming in through the airport and showing documents. People just walked into the country, basically, right? Whoever comes on a ship from somewhere else will just walk into the country, and of course they were. As a result of that, they had
basically like it is now.
Yeah, so the demagogues, the people who wanted power, illicit power, not licit power, undue power. They wanted to get more votes, and they started pitching the idea, or even changing the law in order for these people to vote, so that these people would vote for them, right? And they would promise the same thing that politicians promise today. And that the so-called undocumented aliens, they're illegal aliens. Let's use the correct word. They were promised things by the demagogues in those days, 350, 400 BC already, right? In Greece, they were promised less what we call welfare today. Also, free tickets to entertainment, right? In those days, we didn't have TV, we didn't have radio. So the only way to change people's minds was either by talking in the agora, a soapbox in the middle of on Market Street, or better yet, get the more educated people into a theater, and then the organized interest would fund the comedians. And through comedy, they could get people to start laughing and trying to think in a particular way, given the jokes. Or, the theater also.
Or feeding people to the lines.
Yeah. The only way to change people's minds through communication would be through the theater and through comedy, right? So there were subsidies, governmental subsidies by the Democrats of the time, which were socialists as they weren't called socialists, but when you read Aristotle, you know that that's what they were, because Aristotle talks about this. He says all of these things, right? Communists, people who wanted to take your property away and to divide everything equally, and or reorganize themselves in some kind of communes, or he says all these things have already been tried, and of course they were disastrous. They didn't work, right? So that's Aristotle talking around 350 BC or so. So these things have always existed, and the problem here, of course, the people who, let's think of even the danger of illegal or massive immigration, which of course causes severe problems here, but especially in Europe. Is that they haven't lived here a long time. They don't know our laws. They don't know our language. They don't know our systems. They come in, and let's say if you're an architect, and this happened, it's a case that happened in France, an architect from Tehran, from the Iran way of thinking, goes to Paris, and he cannot find a job as an architect because he doesn't have the degrees that are accepted there and all of that. And so he ends up being what? A waiter at a restaurant. Well, he feels that he's been, given a bad deal, and he begins to feel resentment against the country that actually welcomed him. And this is one of the problems with, immigration, is that it brings into the country people who are not part of the mental system, the ways of thinking and feeling and believing and the concepts of law and what's legal or illegal, which they don't have. They didn't have it in their country. And a lot of them...
Yeah, basically a different culture.
Yeah, different culture. And they were already used to the idea of welfare and free food and these sorts of things in their country. So they bring these ideas also with them. And when they come here, they also begin to expect that. And the politicians, to get elected, begin to actually cater to that in order to get more votes out of them. I mean, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, the Democrats already knew that 80% of the Hispanics in America voted Democratic when they could vote. Today, given what's been happening with inflation and the economic disaster here under financial disaster, especially under Biden. Not that the previous administration solved the problem either. This has apparently dropped down from about 80% to about maybe 60%. So now there's an opportunity on the part of the Republicans to get some of those votes for them. But, so, these things change. But basically what you happen is a different, you see, the libertarians are all in favor of free immigration or something which is what happened in, let's say, in Europe in the 19th century. If you came from Russia to France, no big deal. You just walk right in, right? But you have to realize, for example, that not just good people walk in, criminal organizations walk right in too, right? So you bring in not only different people who have a difficulty adjusting themselves to the new culture and feel that they're really not getting a good deal here, because what are they going to do? They end up working construction, cleaning houses, working in restaurants that pay them, $3 an hour under the table, and then the rest is just maybe they divide the tips, right? So they're not doing well, except some of them. They're more entrepreneurial in it. But I know as a Brazilian, I'm an American citizen now since 2000, but I'm a Brazilian. And I lived in Florida among the Brazilians for a long time. And most of them are not doing well. They're and they feel resentful. They don't understand the language or even the psychology of the language, which is what attaches you to the language, right? And so they, what do? And this happens to all over the world, wherever there is immigration. They watch Brazilian TV all the time instead of watching American TV. They want to find out what soccer teams in Brazil are doing rather than what soccer teams in America is doing. So they're disconnected from the country. Now, maybe, the theory is that over time, okay, their children go to school and they learn, the American way, and their parents die off, and so over time this problem is solved. Yes, I would say if you have a limited immigration, that you allow immigration only if it's needed for the labor force. Other than that, and this has to be severe regulations and laws concerning this. Basically, this is already what I think American immigration law already contains, but nobody's paying attention to it. Nobody's enforcing. The government's not enforcing. Right. So, yeah, what you have is a dilution of the culture. You have a weakening of the American way, let's say, the American way of talking about, of feeling and dealing with problems. And this would happen in France or England or Brazil or any other place, right? You will dilute. And if you want to break up the American way of thinking, if you want to break up the constitutional way of thinking, or the political way of thinking of America, I wouldn't say political, but let's say the constitutional, let's say the whole conception of American law, imperfect as it is, that is supported only by people who have some sort of vague connection with America, in a sense, let's say, more by the sensitivity than by reason or any other thing. They just kind of feel good about it. They say, well, that's the way we do things here. But if you have millions of other people coming in and they're out there in the population, they can actually be appealed to by the enemies of America, within America, in order to get votes out of them, Something else that I'm sure that, the people listening to our conversation here do not know, and I, as a foreigner who lived among the Brazilians and Hispanics in Florida.
There's a question I was want to ask you before we get in.
Yeah.
When I was in Brazil, I had a business in Brazil, and down in Campinas.
Yeah.
And they told me the only two people that in Brazil was rich and poor. Is that true?
No.
They are middle class.
No. There's a large middle class in Brazil, but this middle class is being destroyed very fast by the communistic socialist policies of the last 25 years or so. The middle class has never really done very well in Brazil because of the economic system full of regulations and all kinds of government controls going way back to the 19th century. But the idea of socialism, and this was said by Lula da Silva, our president down in Brazil. He says, I'm a communist, and we must all be equal in poverty. So he's trying to destroy the middle class. Of course, the upper classes can always, take their money and go back, go to England or some other place, right? The idea of the socialists, and this is Lenin's idea. It's it's the idea of social justice. People talk about social justice here in America as if it's something good. Well, the person who defined social justice is Lenin, and he says, the country shall be transformed into a great factory, a big factory, with equal pay for all. That's social justice. In other words, pure, absolute, 100% communism, right? There is a large middle class in Brazil, but it's been suffering for a long time, especially since the year 2000, 2001, when this Labor Workers' Party came in, which is a Leninist communist party, that was able to grow by robbing banks, coming into your business and making you sign under threat,
protection,
transfer your business to them, and then they would sell it and get the money. I mean, these are criminals. This is a criminal.
Well, I know.
Right. This is a criminal. All parties are criminals in some way, but these guys are really dedicated criminals. And then, of course, gradually the middle class has been squeezed and squeezed more and more to the point where they're so overtaxed right now that, and then, of course, so you create, by destroying the middle class, you create a lot of poor. And then you offer them welfare and government service and free food. And then your party becomes the party that is the helper of the poor. And the people become dependent on this party.
That's what's happening here right now.
Yes, it's happening in America too. But as I said before, these are consequences of democracy. Going way back to ancient Greece, it was already like that at the time. Right?
Did I ever tell you about when I was in Brazil and when I was starting the business over there?
Uh-huh. I don't know what business you were in.
I was in a recycling business in Brazil.
What kind of business?
Recycling.
Oh, recycling.
Yeah, and we sat down at a table. I come down from downstairs, and this is 20-something years ago now, 2002.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, when the new government came in, when Lula da Silva and his totalitarian party came in, yeah.
Okay, when I come downstairs, and the guy I was doing business with, I just have to look at it. He had two sons, and one of his sons was he worked with Israel. He was Jewish himself, and but they lived in Brazil. They'd been there for around 40 years. He spoke 9 languages.
Wow.
And I come downstairs, and they treated me, because I was doing business down there, and they rode me around a bulletproof car, and, they made sure I was took care of, But I'm sitting, I'm coming out of my room and going downstairs. I was in the hotel. I think I was in the Campinas.
Yeah.
And I come downstairs, and the guy that I'm working with, he said, "This is Lieutenant so-and-so and so." I mean, I'm saying this because of the crime you're talking about. Okay, he says to me, "This is Lieutenant so-and-so. His son got involved with the drugs, and they're trying to kill him.
Uh-huh.
And they want to get $5,000 from me to get him out of the country." He said, "Which I'm gonna let him have it." And he introduced me. I said, "Yeah, how you doing?" All that blah, the respectful way. And so he said they done kill a bunch of drug dealers that's trying to kill my son, but he wants this $5,000 to get him out of the country until they kill the rest of them and bring him back in the country. And then there was a sergeant over there. He'd been shot a few times, and I'd give a bulletproof vest to one of the guy's son, the one I was doing business with, and his son too. And he gave it to that guy. He'd been shot so many times. But anyway, I met him. He was real nice to me, but I won't tell you the things he told me and the things he done, because I shouldn't be even talked about. But it was all corrupt.
Oh, yeah.
And it was 20-something years ago.
No, Brazil is extremely corrupt, but I was in Thailand, giving some lectures there. And I noticed as soon as I can, because I studied economics for so long, and politics and philosophy and these things, it's like I can tell right away when I'm anywhere, when that includes to what's, in Chattanooga, Tennessee, whether there's corruption in the government or not, and how much there is, And there's a lot of corruption in Thailand. It's like the middle class, the poor just can't get ahead.
Yeah.
Well, there's something going on, something with the something with the taxing system, obviously, right? That's where these things are. Also, if the economy is too controlled, it is controlled by the government in many ways, and there are too many unreasonable regulations. This slows down business, makes business not be as prosperous. It creates an environment in which foreign companies don't want to invest in the country, so there's not enough capital to, in relation to the growing population. So yeah, salaries are going to keep down, wages are going to be down, and people become unhappy and they try the best they can, Well, in the case of Brazil, of course, when this communistic Leninist party, Workers' Party came in 2001, and they're still there to this day. Lula da Silva finally said, he was a labor union organizer, a guy who really never worked in his life. He's just always been an agitator in the labor unions, and created this, this big labor union movement, which is basically a communistic one, of course. And he said, I'm a communist, and he said this openly. He says, I have lied, and I lie all the time. He says this openly on TV. I lie all the time. Nothing that I say is correct. Like he went to France, a couple of years ago, and he said, there are 40 million abandoned children in Brazil.
I believe it.
So that goes in the newspapers, goes all over. No such thing is true. There aren't 40 million. But he says those things just to get attention, right? And
there are a lot. There are a lot. I've seen them. I've seen a lot of abandoned kids.
And his idea is that we should, to be communistic, you have to have equality in poverty. Everybody had to be poor, equally poor, which is what he's just imitating Cuba, of course. That's the Cuban idea. Now, you can't even call this communistic because Marx proposed abundance for all, right? Mistaken idea of his, of course, in terms of the method used, but at least he promised abundance. These guys promised poverty, right? So that's the situation that we have over there, and they've been in power so long that they appointed all the members of the Supreme Court are socialists or communists, right? Some of them, like this new one that was appointed a little while ago, he said, forget the idea of freedom and doing what you want. That's over in this country, right? There's not going to be any freedom of speech or freedom of this or freedom of that. We're going to put an end to that. The guy says this openly on TV, right? And that's the situation Brazil is in. But let's go back to what I say here. What the ancients already knew is that all of these things are a result of democracy. Democracy, let's define democracy here, because I think the last time we were here, you said that democracy is like, sort of like a constitutional system in which there's the rule of law and all of this. No. Democracy has no constitutional competence. Democracy is not a system of government. It is just a method of electing people to government.
Yes.
Right? So the grave mistake created by the founding fathers, right? And we know from, the Bible that the sins of the fathers will be visited on their children, right, and their grandchildren through the fourth generation. Well, more than that, actually. And this is what the United States have been suffering from the beginning. The idea that by electing people to office, we're going to be happy, we're going to have rule of law, we're going to have freedom, we're going to have property and all these things. No. A democratic election changes the government. It does not tell you anything about the moral character, the competence, the wisdom, the rationality of the people elected. And it changes the government. It doesn't tell you what they're going to do, and it does not tell you that what they're going to do is actually according to the fundamental principles of justice and of law that we've known since times of the ancient Egypt. They already knew these things, right? That their law has certain qualities, right? To be law, something that Congress passes, or even if it's according to the Constitution, it does not make it a law, because if there is a mistake in the Constitution and you follow that mistake as you write the law, and the Supreme Court says, well, it's according to the Constitution, therefore it's good, right?
Yeah.
Which they hardly ever do, of course. Then what you have is a bad law or no law at all. Right? And so democracy just tells you that, an election just tells you that somebody got one more vote than the other guy.
Yeah.
It does not tell you that we're going to have a government under law, right? Now, constitutionalism is the opposite of democracy. And this was already perceived by the ancients, and Aristotle talked about it. In Aristotle's political system, there is no democracy. There's no elections. People do not come into power through elections, right? They, number one, have to have a good resume. They have to, remember, what does the word Senate means, right? They didn't have two houses in the old days, right?
No.
The Romans didn't have two houses. They just have the Senate. Of course, the Romans created the tribunes of the people, which was, okay, the senators represent the upper classes. The tribunes of the people represent the rest of the population, right? And so there was sort of like a House of Representatives in Rome in a sense, but not exactly. Now, in Aristotle's proposal, and this I followed that in my proposal, is that there should be no elections. In other words, you choose people according to competence, probity, morality, experience, recognized wisdom. We know who this person is. And number two, this person has to act according to the law and not just make proposals of any kind whatsoever. In some ancient Greek cities, it was a crime, punishable by prison terms, depending on the violation, by fines, and even by death. If you proposed, let's say a bill in the Senate or in the city legislature, right? If you propose a bill that would, let's say, create a situation that would transfer the onus, the weight of that to the shoulders of other people, which is what we have here in America, right? You create some kind of a law, and some people are taxed and other people get the benefits. This is contrary to fundamental principles of law. Yes, there have been many injustices in the past that have to be corrected. How did Plato resolve this? He says, okay, everybody should have an education, right? Now, should we have public schools as a way of giving everybody an education? No, says John Stuart Mill in his On Liberty in 1859. He already saw what the problem was in England at the time, in which the people who were, socialism was coming in. Right? So the idea of the time under democracy is to change people's minds. And so, for example, Latin and Greek, which were the Western civilization attachment to the best of the past, began to be taken off the school's curriculum. Right? Does anybody read, does anybody study Latin I had 4 years of Latin in my middle school, right? Does that happen in America anymore? I mean, from, let's say, basics of Greek, which I had, right? All these things that attach you to the past, let's call it Western civilization, which Christianity brought from the past to the present through its religion. But it has nothing to do with the religion itself, right? It's something that was just as a result of, the civilization that passed collapsed, the Roman Empire collapsed, Greece was gone. So what did the church do? And the best people in the church, they started gathering that kind of information, creating libraries like, for example, my favorite saint, Saint Benedict. What did he do? Created a library and collected all the books that he could get from the past, right, to rebuild Western civilization, right? And he created, right, the monastery of Monte Cassino and other monasteries, right, in order to rebuild the civilization.
I wanted to. I don't apologize. I don't interrupt, but when you said we should not have election, that we should have someone disqualified that we know. Well, I mean, if you got, like, we got Kamala Harris, okay?
Yeah.
We got Donald Trump. Now, people say Kamala is the best way to go because she's going to do this and do that, but she has not done nothing for this country but drive it down in debt.
Yeah. Well, there are two things about Kamala Harris. One is she's a product of this idea of the, 70s and 80s, which was, what they call it, in which you give somebody a chance because he's black or Hispanic or Indian. What was it called? Affirmative action. She is a product of affirmative action, right? And there are a lot of black people in the universities and in public schools and all kinds of places who are a product of this. They actually were not superior. They were not competent. They were given a chance because they belonged to, and you can tell by the way she talks and her vocabulary and her ways of expression that she really was not well educated. She really doesn't know anything.
And my education was 6th grade,
It's better than hers, right? Yeah. So this is a problem when you try. Let's say when you try social justice. Of course, social justice, as I said before, it was defined by Lenin, the father of the Soviet Union, the great killer of millions of people, mostly by starvation. He said that social justice means that total communism, that the country will be transformed into a big factory, right, with equal salaries for all. Of course, just a big lie to get the support of confused people. No such thing happened over there. When they took power, they enriched themselves, ate the best that they could, with, when they say with the white linen on their tables and everything, and they ate the best. Well, the people were actually starving in the streets, like, parents died of starvation. They left their children, as orphans. And these orphans, skeletons, just skin and bones, going in the street, saying, please give me some food, and dying because people could not even help them because they themselves didn't have anything. Right? I have a description of what happened here at that time. About 7 million people died of starvation, right, from 1918 to 1924. And they continued to die even into Stalin's regime, of course.
That's Russia, right?
Yeah, even way back in 1934, 35, they were still dying of starvation or things,
Well, now in Africa, a lot of people are dying. Yeah. There's people starving to death here in this country right now.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. Americans have to understand. The world has to understand. And this was not said by me. This was said by Marx and Mao Zedong and other communist leaders, that democracy is just a doorway to socialism. Which is why, for example, Mao Zedong preached to the rest of the world and to American communists and young people in college in America who went down the street. I remember, even into 1974 in Iowa City when I was at the University of Iowa, they went down the street shouting, what's the Mao slogan? What was that called? Get the bad guys out and organize the fight or something like that, right? I mean, and it's amazing how the conservatives, the libertarians, the classical liberals do not fight that way, right? They think that by publishing policy papers to influence Congress or something, they're going to solve this problem. They're not going to solve this problem. We're at war, We're at war. It's like getting,
it's like Trump.
It's like, Jenny, get your gun, okay? Get ready because something bad is coming. This country is moving towards a civil war. Get yourself prepared because we're not going to solve this problem through elections or Trump, right?
Trump can't do.
My God.
He can only do so much, and I have to agree.
He doesn't even know what has to be done, and his people, according to my view, do not know what has to be done because they don't understand culture, right? They don't understand the fundamentals of culture, which is something that the socialists know very well. You don't spread these ideas by talking about them on PBS. You spread them through the theater. You spread them through Hollywood, through Disney World, and if you look at all the Disney World, Disney has promoted itself as like a family thing, right? No, they've been promoting homosexualism since 1939, right? If you look at the first movie, which they made in the first cartoon they made, even those cartoons already, they're already promoting homosexualism if you really pay attention to that. Right. Look at The Lion King, for example. It promotes socialism. It promotes homosexualism through also through fashions, right? The most outrageous fashions, right? Irreverent. Let's call it. They created a culture of irreverence, right? The hatred of the perfect, the hatred of the good, the hatred of the beautiful. So the arts show ugliness rather than beauty, right? The paintings show ugliness instead of beauty. And this has been going on since already, like around 1850 and 1860, in painting in France, you could tell this was going on, right? That there was a desire to destroy form, destroy beauty, destroy the human form, destroy, let's call it, man, right, or the individual, right? It was already going on. This kind has been going on for 200 years or more, right? And the conservatives, these people have no idea this stuff is going on. They keep saying, well, the radical left is going to take over Washington. We send as much money as you can for the campaign of Ted Cruz or whatever, the Republicans, so that we have a majority in Congress because the radical left is going to destroy the country. Yeah, the radical, is there any left that's not radical? To begin, the language of the conservatives is wrong to begin with. They don't know how to use language. If you don't control language, you don't control the meaning of words, right? You don't frame the debate. And they're not framing the debate because even the word, they even accepted the word democracy, right? Democracy is something, as Marx said, right? It's a way to power. The democracy and socialism is about the same thing, right? Right? What did the Communist Party of Russia, did it call itself the Communist Party of Russia? No, it's called the Social Democratic Party, right? That's
Well, see,
they never. So they control, right now, for example, they have the promotion of Mexican culture on Sunday night, Sunday night football. In the football game, for example, they have the Mexican flag appear in front of the TV, and it says "Por la cultura," for the culture. Why should the United States be promoting Mexican culture, right?
Because Spanish people are here. Yeah. They want them to buy their product.
They want them to vote for them, right? And so the movies, sports, fashion, television, they are basically totally taken over by the socialists or people with a socialistic mind. what does the word? I mean, the founding fathers were, especially some of them, were totally against democracy, right? As Benjamin Franklin said, democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what they're going to have for dinner. Absolutely true, right? And yet, as I said, Article 1 of the Constitution, by mistake or by intention, inserted democracy as the way to form the government of the United States. Not only that, but they also control the Supreme Court by appointments, and they control the budget of the justice system through Congress. That should be a totally separate. In other words, you're supposed to have three different powers that are, let's say, separate from one another with equal powers. Well, if you control the budget of the justice system, you do not have, you cannot trust that the justice system is really doing its job as quickly as possible to solve problems, right? What do? To begin with, they're understaffed. Number two, they're not competitive, right? So they don't have any incentive to move and do things fast. But it's also a very cumbersome kind of thing. I mean, we have this idea, this great love of the due process of law. The due process of law is extremely cumbersome. It is full of all sorts of diseases in it, and it's also extremely expensive, and it deters any person who's poor from seeking justice. Forget it. If you're poor and you got a problem, forget it. You're not going to get justice in this country or in any country, right? And the Republicans, libertarians, all these people, they don't notice this kind of stuff. They're living in sort of dreamland, and they think that somehow by writing little papers and giving fellowships to people at the Heritage Foundation, they're going to change it. They're not. Forget it. It's over.
Yeah.
America is moving quickly in the direction of socialism and communism due to Article 1 of the Constitution, which, number one, controls the formation of the government. Number two, gives Congress absolute power over all financial situations and cases in the United States. Okay? No wonder they ended up creating the Federal Reserve, the Bank of the United States, and then the Federal Reserve later on,
Well, they don't have enough gold to back up all the dollars they're printing up.
Of course. And do the bankers of the world, this is all internationalized now, do these bankers actually want, do the people who control, who is appointed? Do you think that Congress or the president who are connected with the financial interest, will they appoint, let's say, somebody who's going to be in the Federal Reserve System, so-called, beautiful, meaningless title, that actually shades all the dirty dealings that they do in there by going, making the value of the dollar go up and down all the time, which they do not have the right to do, because that value belongs to those who produce the value, the workers, the investors, whoever is producing economic value of any kind. Those are the ones who should actually be controlling by having some kind of Hayek, who studied these things. He's one of the great monetary theorists, said that returning to gold is not going to solve the problem. He thinks that we have to control it by rules. In other words, rules, not discretion. So keep make the Federal Reserve System useless by simply saying to them, you cannot do these things you're doing. Right? Okay. But I actually think that we should have, as David Friedman, the son of Milton Friedman, has proposed, and I think other people have, that the dollar should be based in given stability through a basket of commodities, right? Let's say platinum and all of these extremely difficult metals, right? So gold and silver will come into. If production, let's say the economy is growing at 4% per year, and platinum and gold is growing by just about 1% a year or so, given the difficulty of extraction, then we're actually going to have a deflation in the system rather than inflation. If inflation takes value away from you, right, then deflation over time will enrich you, which is what we need. We need a slow process of deflation, which in a sense we had with the gold and silver system in the 19th century, in spite of the violations and all kinds of interferences with the value of gold and silver at the time that created those panics of 1819, of 1849, and of 92 or something like that, which, was later, used to say, in other words, first they create the problem. Then they offer the solution. The solution is central banking to control this thing. No, the solution is to give the people, the consumer, the person that has an account on Wells in the Wells Fargo Bank, to control the value of those dollars are in there, which at the moment she does not have. That's his property, It's not the government's property. Right. Same thing with the taxes that are collected, which are abusive and absurd right now. But those things do not belong to you, senator, or to you, representatives. They belong to the people. They're in your hands temporarily to be used in the most responsible and necessary ways that you can probably find. Other than that, it's not your money, right? Kamala Harris has no right to say that it's not her money. She does not have the right to say, and the Republicans, if they promise the same thing or something different, do not have the right to claim this, that she's going to give $24,000 or something to every family so that they can make a down payment on a house. It's not your money. You have no right to do that. You are promising to commit crime, basically. All right? None of these things are constitutional, except in the sense that, let's go back to Article 1. It does give Congress the power to mess around with the money and do anything it wants in terms of finances. It's still there in Article 1. That's what we need to reform. This country will not survive, has no future if it does not reform Article 1.
I tell you,
Okay.
what they can do, they can come up with the stupidest ways to spend money in Congress that I've ever seen in my life.
As long as they give you re-election, to power of re-election, to claim that I have written this law, look what good things I'm doing for you, with your own money, fooling you, thinking that I'm doing something for you, when actually I am destroying the value that you produce every day when you go to work, and then I give you something back and make you think that I'm giving something to you.
But it seems to me maybe both Democrats do it more than Republicans, I could say. But if they see something that's going to hurt them, they make a law against it.
Oh, yeah.
And that seems to be the biggest problem here in the country today, is that they constantly, if they want to cheat, they'll make a law they can cheat.
Yeah.
That's what, that's really what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Instead of having it just an honest vote. And I believe in everybody having a right to vote. And I believe in everybody to have their own opinion. But I also believe in people looking at where they are and where they were.
Right.
I believe in people looking at what the plans are of those that's going to take over.
Yeah.
It's not just Donald Trump. I mean, when Clinton was president, our economy was good. Our deficit was good.
Yeah, he almost balanced the budget. Not quite, but almost.
Yeah, and
well, it was not him. It was Rubin, the Trade Secretary. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, he had a part of it, I guess. But, basically when he was president, he done a lot of things different, but they all do this. I mean, he's probably guilty of the same as other people. I mean, there ain't none of them will have a halo over their head. I don't care who they are.
Yeah.
But it's about America. It ain't about It ain't about Kamala. It ain't. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about what's best for our country.
Right. But the thing is, let's go back to what I said before. If you have an electoral system based on the Marxian parties trying to win votes, they will never obey such a thing, never go for such a thing. Suppose that the election law says, okay, you can go on TV or in the newspapers or whatever, and you can simply, as you propose, right, simply say what you honestly want to do and think that this should be done. Well, okay, let's say that and you are actually going to be punished, and maybe you cannot even run if you say, Donald Trump is an evil man, he's a fascist, he's going to end, turn America into a fascist country. So, or, as Trump says of Kamala Harris, something bad about her. Cannot say, let's say if the election law says cannot say that, then people say, well, that would be for the good of the country, right? Honestly present your what is it you want to do, and without bad-mouthing the other person, right? Let's say. But you see all the inconsistencies here that, as I said, the moment you have democracy, elections, parties, factions, and this whole civil war on the back burner that we have, which will generate another civil war. I've been predicting this since 1981. Nobody wants to believe me.
I don't doubt it.
It's coming.
House divided against us.
Yeah, there are many reasons for the other Civil War, But in the end, when you really look at the Civil War of 1861, 1865, is that the Democrat, the parties involved cannot come to any agreement. Like the founding fathers tried, in Philadelphia, some kind of accommodation. What do they call it? Compromise. In other words, okay, we debate and everybody offers different ideas, and then we say, well, the best one here is this one, right? Yeah. That is impossible in a democratic system, right? The simple fact that you come honestly and say, okay, this is what I want to do, does not actually mean that you will do it. And number two, that you will be able to do it. The other party might simply negate what you want to do. But it also means, is what you want to do legal? Does it follow fundamental principles of law? And
will it better the country?
Will it better the country? Well, if it's according to the fundamental principles, it will better the country, yes. Can you actually even propose that? So we go back to the ancient cities of Greece, where you could not propose such a thing because it would shift the burden, the cost to other people, right? So you cannot say, well, tax the rich in order to help the poor. You cannot say that, okay? If you want to help the poor, the best thing to help the poor is to have a booming economy with jobs all over the place and competition for workers that will and also make sure that your money, that the value of the currency is not destroyed every day, right? I said this here last time, for example. The American worker has this called social security system, which is actually a social poverty and insecurity system, in which it's actually just like most things that are happening. It's when you really look at all these things, they're basically violations of the right to property, right? The money that's taken out of your paycheck and as a social security tax is not controlled by you. It's controlled by somebody else. It's not invested in the best place possible. It does not get 5 or 10 or 15% a year in interest. And you work for 50 or 55 years and retire at the age of 67. And instead of getting, as I said, if you privatize it, meaning that it is your account, sure, we're going to force you, we're going to compel you, we don't want to be poor. And this is Platonic justice, by the way, and is actually correct according to Platonic justice, that it is correct according to Platonic justice for the government to make sure that when you get and we're talking about good government here, not bad government, the best government we can get, make sure that when you get to 67 years old, you're going to have some money for your retirement, right? If it's the system is privatized, in other words, it's under your control, not under the control of the government. The Social Security Administration does not manage your money for you, which right now they mismanage and it's just a slush fund. I mean, and as far as I know, the government doesn't even have an obligation to pay you, your Social Security. That's something that people expect, and they're going to lose elections if they don't do that. It's probably not even legal to do that. Anyway, privatize. Okay, I work for 50 years, you work for 50 years, and every month $200 or something goes into some number there, like your Social Security number. Okay, make that Social Security number an account at, some banks or something. Make sure you have regulations to the point where you can actually manage that within certain reasons, like you can invest in gold, you can invest in platinum, maybe you can invest in the best stocks of the year or something like that. But it is yours, right? You control it. If in 55 years, the American worker, after all that effort, getting up every day and going to work, right, to do the world's work, if they got only 5% interest on whatever goes into this account, they would retire at 67 with about anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 a month. Okay? How much does the American worker get as a result of government control of his money? Average, $1,900.
I got $1,500.
Where did the money go? Where did the money go? It's your money. It's the money so it's a violation, it's a severe, absurd violation of the right to property, which is that this money doesn't belong to the government. It may be managed by the government, but it is not theirs to give and distribute and do whatever they want. It is your money for your retirement when you retire 67, and then by obligation, by law, they have to pay you $15,000 a month. Not $1,900. And I think right now the average is about that the American worker on the average, some got more like $2,300, $2,400
a year.
Yeah, because they paid more.
Thanks for joining us today. Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview with Jose Stelle. Good night, world. We will be talking to you next time.
The views and opinions expressed on all Talkin' Live presentations are those of the host and their guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of the Talkin' Live TV broadcast studio, or by this channel or its management.